So in this episode, we're going to talk about the Cerrado. Um, the Cerrado is the second largest biome in Brazil. It's in the central Brazilian plateau, middle of the country, stretching from the Atlantic coast here, all the way to the border with Paraguay here. It's surrounded by other biomes like the Amazon here, the Caatinga here, the Atlantic forest here, and the Pantanal here. So it contacts other Brazilian biomes, all other Brazilian biomes, with the exception of the Pampa. So the Cerrado is a tropical savanna, and it's called the cradle of water because many of the rivers, including the large rivers of the Amazon, have their headwaters in the Cerrado. So as you can see here, so for example, the Xingu, Tocantins, and Araguaia, these rivers all have the headwaters in the Cerrado. Also, the São Francisco River also has the headwaters in the Cerrado here, and also the Parnaíba here, which runs to the Paraná Basin, also has the headwaters here, and the Paraguay also has headwaters in the Cerrado. So the Cerrado has many waters, and here you can see the different hydrographic regions. And you see that here, for example, you have the São Francisco hydrographic region. Here's the Tocantins Araguaia, and this is the Paraná. And then here is the point where they meet. This is called the meeting of the headwaters, the Águas Emendadas in Portuguese. So the three basins join here. This is near Brasília, the capital. So the climate in the Cerrado has wet summers and dry winters, very marked dry season. The temperatures usually range between 22 and 27 degrees. And the precipitation rainfall is usually between 1,300 and 2,300 millimeters. The soils of the Cerrado are very typical. They're nutrient poor and aluminum rich soils. The Cerrado is sometimes considered an upside down forest because a lot of the biomass is underground. So trees tend to have really large root systems, and the canopy is not as big as the roots. So that's why it's called an upside down forest by some authors. One of the main characteristics of the Cerrado is that many plants are adapted to fire. So natural fires are a common theme in the Cerrado, and this has been going on for millions of years. So you have plants adapted to resist fire. So this is a fire in the Cerrado. You see that one of the adaptations is the thick and corky bark of the trees. You can see here, you can see here, that resist the fire. So after a fire, even if you have the trunk completely black, you cut it and you see that the tree is still alive. And you have also adaptations of the leaves. The leaves sometimes are leathery and rough. And after a fire event, often you see these super bloom events, plants blooming and sprouting after a fire. Okay, so fire is something, and some plants actually need the fire to germinate. Some seeds need fire to germinate. They depend on the fire. So fire is part of the natural system of the Cerrado. Regarding how old the Cerrado is, there's been some authors argue that the Cerrado is like a recent biome that was formed recently. But most studies actually give a very old origin for the Cerrado. In terms of geology, the rocks, you have rocks from the late Cretaceous, especially the older plateaus, and then you have like the plateaus like this one. This is a typical profile of a Cerrado geomorphology. So you have plateaus which are older, and then you have younger valleys which with sedimentary rocks and crystalline rocks here. The current biota of the Cerrado, the dates give are between 10 and 4 million years ago. And that coincides with the worldwide savanna expansion. So the grasses expanded worldwide because of a cooling of the earth, and then the savanna expanded, and then the savanna also expanded here in Brazil. So it's interesting because you have this, in Brazil, you have this, what we call a dry diagonal, which is the combination of the Cerrado, the Caatinga, and also the Chaco here. This is a dry diagonal that separates the rainforest area, the main rainforest areas, the Amazon and the Atlantic forest. Okay, and that's an important biogeographic component in South America, both because species adapted to open habitats can circulate here, and this prevents forest adapted species from going from here to here. And there has been connections between the Atlantic forest and the Amazon through time. So sometimes you have species from the Amazon showing up here in the Atlantic forest. And then you have some patches of Atlantic forest or Amazon in the Cerrado and Caatinga, and in these patches you see typical forest species from the from either the Atlantic forest or the Amazon. And plants adapted to fire is interesting because they actually adapted in situ in the Cerrado. So you see here, for example, for several different species of plants. So these are different genera and different species here. So this is an evolutionary tree of the many species of the Cerrado. What's important here is to see the red area, the red branches here. That means a species adapted to fire. So the adaptation to build to cope with fire evolved independently in many different lineages of Cerrado plant species. And usually the species in the plateaus are older, evolutionarily speaking, so they have older origin than the species that are in the valley, in the forests, in the valleys. And also the Cerrado has, in terms of biogeographical connections, has more connections with the Chaco in Paraguay than with the Caatinga in Brazil. These are some typical views of the Cerrado, okay? So we have grasslands and you have sparse trees sometimes. Along the rivers, you have what we call riparian forests or gallery forests. We'll see the difference in a minute. These are typical Cerrado trees with twisted trunks, and sometimes some species leave, they lose their leaves during the dry season. This is a vereda with the buriti palm, typical when you have this water close to the surface of the soil. You have this wetland areas and with these buriti palms. These are termite mounds. They're very, very common in the Cerrado. This is kind of a common theme that you see both in natural areas, in natural grasslands, and also in pastures and grasslands for cattle. And they even have an importance in terms of they tend to last thousands and thousands of years. And then you have murunduns, which are like little mounds that they're formed because of this termite mounds. With time, they get sedimentation and they become part of the landscape, just little mounds in the landscape, even if the termites are not there anymore. So they're a very important landscape component. A very typical feature of the landscape are we call chapadas, which are plateaus, like this one here. This is the Chapada das Mesas in the state of Maranhão. So you have a flat tabletop mountain surrounded by Cerrado vegetation, and very often you have water sources in these areas and waterfalls. This is another Chapada dos Veadeiros. It's not as flat as the other two, but also is a Chapada with some buriti palms here in Cerrado and grasslands. The Veadeiros is in Goiás state, near Brasilia. This is Chapada dos Guimarães, which is in Mato Grosso, state of Mato Grosso. That's a waterfall there. Also another example of a flat tabletop area. This is actually the middle of South America. That's kind of called the geodesic point of South America. I guess if you draw a north to south and an east to west line, this is the center of the continent. It's right at the Chapada dos Guimarães. These are some examples of those are all protected areas, national parks. So the vegetation types of the Cerrado, you can roughly divide into three kinds. That's a very kind of a easy division. You have grasslands, shrublands, and woodlands. Okay, that would be one way to divide it. We have the Cerrado, what we call Cerrado sensu lato, which means in a broad sense, that means the whole biome, including all different vegetation types. But when we can say like Cerrado stricto, sensu strictor, or a strict sense, in other words, that's the typical vegetation of the Cerrado. Okay, it would be like a savanna, either a shrubby savanna or a wooded savanna, but something like this with grasses and trees. That's the typical Cerrado. Here you can see that it's a gradient. Okay, there's no sharp line between the different kinds, but you see that the biomass, so the amount of plant material that you have is small in the grasslands, and also and of course larger in the woodlands. Okay, going through the shrublands. Here you see the landscape. You can have many different kinds of areas. So you have the grassland here, the campo. Okay, we have the cerrado here, the typical cerrado here. This is a cerradão, which is the woodland, the forested area. Also here, a riparian forest or gallery forest along a river. And here you also have the rupestриan field, which only occurs in rock outcrops. This could be more actually more complex. This is a more detailed view of the different looks that the cerrado can have. So again, a gradient that goes from so here you have like a river, like a large river. So you have riparian forest or ciliar, mata ciliar, riparian forest, on the river margins. When the river is small, the forest actually connects, the canopy connects, and that forms what we call the gallery. So that's a gallery forest. Okay, some people call this a gallery forest as well, but the typical gallery forest is on small streams. Okay, so here's the soil in orange here, and this is the rock bed. So see, the soil is deep here, so you can have forest in deep soil. Okay, when the soil gets shallow, you do get a forest, but the forest the soil doesn't the water doesn't stay in the soil. So then you get what we call dry forest or mata seca. Okay, so the forest is really dry and tends to lose the leaves in the dry season. This is the cerradão or the wooded cerrado. Okay, so we have a large soil here for nutrients for the trees. And then here you have the strict sense cerrado, okay, sensu stricto, going from a dense cerrado to a typical to a more barren, and then you get to this when you have rock, you have what you call the Parque de Cerrado Park, where you have trees concentrated in some areas, or not trees but shrubs. This is the palm tree habitat that I showed before with buritis, vereda, or other palm trees too. That depends on the amount of water that's retained in the soil. Here's the rocky field. Okay, this campo rupestre, cerrado rupestre and campo rupestre. So those are two rupestrian or rocky outcrops area. Okay, and then you have the grasslands. Okay, so it's a gradient. Sometimes it's hard to say if we're in the one or another kind of habitat. So the Cerrado is a biodiversity hotspot like the Atlantic forest, but it's what we call a neglected biome because people tend to pay more attention to the Amazon and the Atlantic forest than to the Cerrado. Okay, it's the largest tropical savanna in South America, and it's similar to the savanna in Africa, for example, in terms of habitat, although it doesn't have all the large mammals that are present in Africa, but in terms of habitat, it reminds that. It's the largest hotspot in the Western Hemisphere, okay? Has 2 million square kilometers. Virtually almost all of it in Brazil, has like 1% in Bolivia and Paraguay, but virtually everything is also in Brazil. It's one of the richest tropical savannas in the world, and also very unknown. Many species are unknown to science. Just to give you an idea, almost 350 new vertebrate species were described between 1998 and 2008. Can talk about vertebrates, not bugs, not insects, but vertebrate species, like mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians, and fish. There's a lot of biotic exchange with adjacent biomes. Like I said, the Cerrado has a huge border with all other biomes, so there's a lot of exchange, and it serves as a stepping stone between forest areas, for example. This, just to give an idea, there's more than 12,000 plant species in the Cerrado. 4,000 are endemic, so 34% of endemism. That's very high. Amphibians, also 35% of the more than 200 amphibians are endemic or only occur there. The reptiles is the highest, actually, 37, almost 40% of the reptiles, of the lizards, and occur, mostly lizards occur there, and snakes and other reptiles. The birds don't have a high endemism, so most of the birds in the Cerrado are found in other places. The mammals don't have a high amount of endemism as well. But in total, for the different groups, you have 1/3, almost 1/3 of the species are found only in the Cerrado. So protecting the Cerrado is very, very important too, because if the Cerrado is destroyed, you're destroying these species. These are some typical animals of the Cerrado. The blue-throated macaw, with the blue throat here, beautiful animal. The maned wolf, which is a beautiful animal. It's a wolf, so it's a carnivore, but actually half of the diet of the wolf is a fruit, a species of fruit. It's called the wolf apple. I'm going to show you in a minute. So half of the diet is like on small mammals, and the other half is on fruit. So it's almost like not a vegetarian wolf, but almost like a vegetarian wolf. This is the giant armadillo. It's endangered species, huge. It can reach 30 to 40 kilograms. That's a lot, very large, the largest armadillo, largest living armadillo. That's the giant anteater, a beautiful animal, typical of the Cerrado, also endangered. This is a common bird species, the siriema, the red-legged siriema, very common in the Cerrado, with red long legs. This is a frog endemic to the Canastra National Park region. Tree frog. That's the largest bird we have in South America, the rhea, related to the ostrich in Africa. And that's a worm lizard. It's a legless lizard. It's not a snake, it's a legless lizard, also typical of the Cerrado. Some of the plants, the tabebuia, the yellow or tabebuia, Tabebuia aurea. It's a very typical tree during the dry season. You have beautiful yellow flowers. This is the lobeta, the wolf apple. That's the flower, but the fruit is round, and the fruit is eaten by the wolf. This is the flower of the pequi, pequizeiro, which is a typical tree of the Cerrado. The fruit is eaten by people. It's a very beautiful tree. This is one of the trees that rely on fire for germination. The seeds need fire to germinate. The buriti palm here, also important component of the Cerrado and the veredas. This is the mangabeira, which produces the mangaba tree. The pequi tree looks a bit like this, okay? The marolo or araticum, also a typical tree of the Cerrado, fruit of the Cerrado. And this is the golden grass. This grass is used for handicraft, for for jewelry, for people make earrings and bracelets and other jewels. Also, placemats and other crafts with this grass. It's important for the traditional for the traditional population. The tradition of the Cerrado. Climate change is a big issue in the Cerrado, as you can see here in this comparison of different surface temperature, comparing 2014-19 compared to 1990 and 95. You see that the Cerrado is the area that got most of the drastic changes. So this is early in the morning, this is in the evening. You see the increase in temperature is 2.5 degrees Celsius in the Cerrado especially, okay? Also humidity, which is shown here early in the morning and in the evening. You see that the highest differences in the lowest humidity, the highest difference between humidity is found in the Cerrado, okay, with 15% less humidity than 20 years ago. Okay, or 20, 30 years ago. So the temperature increase and the reduction in humidity is very serious, and it points to an eventual ecosystem collapse in the near future. So the Cerrado may become a desert in the future if this trend continues. Okay, it's a recent paper that just came out. Regarding human occupation and land use, the Cerrado, one of the first people to occupy the Cerrado, it's from 10 to 9,000 years ago. It's called the Itaparica tradition in Bahia. We have archaeological remains of that. About 6,500 years ago, the modern indigenous populations occupied the Cerrado, including indigenous tribes like the Xavante from the central Brazilian area. After European colonization, the Cerrado was actually too far from the coast to be occupied, right? So only after the Paraguay War in the late 1800s that the Brazilian government started encouraging people to go to the west, to occupy the lands in central Brazil. And then, of course, but that was really not very strong until we started with the urbanization process for over the whole country. It started in the 1940s, and then people start moving to the Cerrado, using pastures and clearing the Cerrado to plant and to raise cattle. But the big boom came after the construction of Brasilia. Brazil's capital. Brasilia is right here in the middle of the country. The capital of Brazil used to be Rio up until 1959. So in 1960, Brasilia was inaugurated. So this is the construction of Brasilia. This is what it looks like today, the same area. You see the Cerrado here. Okay, the area, there was nothing there. Okay, this was the middle of nowhere. So the city was just set in a pristine Cerrado area. Brasilia was planned by architects and landscape planners, and it has this airplane design. So you have the monumental axis here, and then the two wings of the airplane, the north wing and the south wing, and the lake here that was artificial lake that was constructed here. So you have the city growing around this design of this airplane. Today, Brazil has the metropolitan area has about 4 million inhabitants, so it's a very large city, and that also brought the development and brought roads and brought connection to central Brazil. So then after that, then you have the expansion of the agriculture. Brazil is a major crop producer and exporter. Most of this new frontier is in the Cerrado, especially soybean, corn, rice, and in recent times, coffee. We also have livestock, charcoal production, and also eucalyptus plantation. The deforestation is very high. If you see this comparison here between 2001 and 2019, comparing Amazonia and Cerrado, you see that the annual deforestation in the Cerrado was almost every year was higher in the Cerrado than the Amazon, okay, with a few exceptions, but usually deforestation was higher in the Cerrado. So the Cerrado is suffering a lot more deforestation than the Amazon. It's estimated that in the last 50 years, the Cerrado lost 50% of its cover, to especially soybean and livestock. And the trouble is protected areas represent only 3% of the Cerrado. Okay, the target of the Convention on Biological Diversity is 17%. So it's way, way less than what should be protected. Here you see a map of the protected areas, which are the red ones are like untouched areas. Okay, the yellow areas are protected areas where you can have sustainable development. The deforested area is the beige here, and the Cerrado, native Cerrado is green. So you see that of course the most of the deforestation was in the south here, okay, because it's closer to the large cities and centers. So the like Brazil is here, the capital Goiás, Goiânia is here. So the area in the north, this is called Matopiba because it's Maranhão, Tocantins, Piauí, and Bahia. So Matopiba, this area here in the north, is more preserved, but actually is the one that suffered more deforestation in recent times. But it's so that's where the larger remains of the Cerrado are located today. You see deforestation here between 1985 and 2017. So you have a loss of millions of hectares of forest and savanna. Grasslands not so much, but you have 5.6% loss of both forest and savanna, and 1% loss of grasslands. So that's when you compare 1985 to the present, you see something like this. Okay, so today only 56% of the Cerrado has native vegetation. 44% has been altered. Okay, and of course this area is not. I mean, most of this area is also degraded. Okay, it's not pristine. And what about the future? Well, that depends on how we use it. If we do business as usual, if we keep doing what we do, that's the estimate for the 2050, 30 years from now. Then you have this, all these areas in red will lose their native vegetation. Okay, so even areas in the north that are well preserved will be all fragmented and reduced. If we work on, and that's the projected extinctions of 3 species. So we have a highest extinction here in the southeast area, especially here, here, and here. Also a bit here, and not much up north because it's the better preserved area. But if we take care of the Cerrado and we protect areas, we control the advance of crops, this would be the cropland area here in orange. And then if we also invest on restoration, okay, so the green areas are restoration. So if we do that, then we get a better picture for the Cerrado in the future. Okay, so there's hope. If we do our homework, there's some hope that the Cerrado will be still standing in 2050. Okay, that's it.